We now welcome in Joe Dumars, the Executive Vice President and Head of Basketball Operations for the National Basketball Association. Joe, let's start with the 65-game minimum for postseason awards for all NBA, because that's been a hot topic lately. Where does the league stand on how this is this working the way that it was intended to?
Well, it is. And look, there are always, anytime you put something in, Malika, there are going to be some unintended consequences. And we knew that going in, and that's why we put the threshold at, like, you can miss up to 20% of the season and still be eligible. But we always knew that, look, there could be a situation where one of the players went past 20% of the season who's having a good year. But you can't, like, not put the rule in because of that one or two guys that it may affect. So we knew this going in, but we thought putting in 17 games, that you could miss 17 games and still be eligible, was a really good number. We bargained it with the Players Association. Owners signed off on it. Competition committee signed off on it. So this was a collective agreement with everyone that this was the right approach to take.
Well, it wouldn't just be one or two players, though. There would actually be 5 players that were all NBA last year, including Giannis Antetokounmpo, the leading vote getter, who would not be eligible based on the number of games that they'd played.
And that's the unintended consequences, Malika. Like I said, whether it's 2 or 5, we knew that it was going to be unintended consequences along the way. But like I said, everyone signed off on this, and everyone thought, okay, 17 is a good number. 20% of the season is a good number as a cutoff point.
Is one of the unintended consequences, like you mentioned, that players maybe have a higher risk of getting hurt?
I think when you play 82-game season, that can happen anytime. And so, look, we schedule 82 games for every season. You know, you have guys get hurt the first week of the season, the middle of the season, the last week of the season. The prospect of injury is always there in the NBA. No matter what the situation is, it's always there.
So let's go back to the 65 games. I am curious, 58 games, right? That's the threshold to be eligible to lead the NBA in scoring, those sorts of things. Why was it 65 for all of this as opposed to matching it up with that 58?
Malika, I remember during the collective bargaining, it was a subject back and forth. It was negotiated back and forth. A lot of numbers were thrown around, and 65 is just a number it landed on. I can't, like, go back and tell you exactly how all the negotiations went, but I knew that it was a debated subject matter, and different numbers were thrown from different sides on this, and it was just a number that everyone agreed upon.
Yeah, and you mentioned it was collectively bargained. Are there any discussions about changing this for next season?
No, this is just kind of come up as a hot topic here, maybe this week, last week, or whatever. I'm not sure how long it's been a hot topic, Malika, but there's been no discussions about that. No one has called and said we should, renegotiate this or anything like that. There's been no calls like that.
Could there be?
I have no idea. You're asking me to speculate. I have no idea, Malika, if we'll get calls or not. I just don't know. But as of now, you and I speaking here today, Malika, like, no one's called and talked about this.
Okay. So we have heard from some players, right? Not just folks who sit next to me in our studios here on the NBA on ESPN, Draymond Green, for an example. What would you say to those players who are critical of this rule?
That we sat down, we felt like we had an issue that we had to address. It had gotten to the point where Malika, the numbers that we used were this. The star players, the top 25 players in the league, were averaging missing 24 games a season. And so instead of 24, we put it at 17 as a cutoff point. And we felt like, okay, 20% of the season, that takes into account a lot of things, injuries and whatnot. And so the fact that it went from 24 to 17 is not like a big dip, but I understand. I understand what Draymond is saying. I understand what any player is saying, Malika. I really do. Look, it was a few years ago, but I did this before. So I understand, like, injuries and guys having to step off the court and can't go on a certain night. Like, I completely understand that. As a former player, I get what the guys are saying. So I never really push back on them having an opinion on this because those are the guys that got to get out there and play.
Yeah, on the one hand, Joe, I understand the idea that we have seen this momentum towards players sitting out of big games that needed to be corrected. And so I do understand the sentiment. Well, in part, teams and players made this bed, proverbial bed, you need to lie in it. But on the other hand, I'm seeing someone like Tyrese Halliburton, who actually is hurt, who is getting hurt and not being able to play in games and is now at risk of losing millions and millions of dollars because of a rule that was just put in place this year. He has one season to make All-NBA, and he is at risk of not doing that. What do you say to that?
That it's unfortunate that we tried to take into account. We thought, I'll say it again, Malika, we thought that missing 20% of the season was a good number. And everybody around the game, all the stakeholders thought, okay, this is fair. Like, so when something happens like this to Tyrese, or I think there's been talk about Joel as well, Malika, you look at it and you go, you shake your head and you go, man, this is not what we intended. But we also knew that it could possibly happen. And so I would feel horrible for Tyrese. I can feel horrible for Joel. But this is what everyone around the game thought was fair.
I want to touch on one more topic while we have you here, Joe. The scoring around the NBA. It has been up. It has been exploding. We saw for the first time ever 2 players have a 70-point game in a single week. That's the first time in NBA history that has happened. And here on NBA Today and on other shows, the league has faced criticism for incentivizing offense, essentially, taking away some of the power of defensive moves and the arsenal that players have to go to. What would you say to that?
So I would say I'm glad you brought that up. Never once have we talked about, we want to see 150 to 151. Malika, I went to a game, I don't know, a week or 10 days ago in Boston, Denver at Boston. One of the best games of the year, 100 to 102. It was a great, great game. What I've said internally and what we all say internally here is, irrespective of the score, whether it's 150 to 151 or 100 to 101, all people really want to see is a great game. So there's no push here that we want to see a 150-point game. What we have talked about with the GMs and head coaches is maybe tweaking some of the rules to allow the defense a little bit more flexibility, and that's fair. And when those guys bring that to us, we take it to the competition committee, and then that's when you see rules change. But there's no push. I can tell you, Malika, there's no push here that we want to see, 140-point games. It's just not.
Sure.
It's just not the case.
I think my hope as a fan of the game, right, it would be that some things remain special, some things remain sacred. And when you see multiple players, it's fantastic the first time, but when you see multiple players in such a short span putting up 70, putting up 60 over and over again, it kind of dilutes that and makes it a little bit less special.
Yeah, but I think we only saw it like 4 times. So
In a
I don't think
month.
it's like something weird. I know,
a lot.
right? All right, I know. But like it's not every month. And so, you know what? You and I, let's get back on like after 82 games. Let's see how many of those games we're talking about. I hear what you're saying, and I'm with you, Malika. I'm a fan too, so I feel exactly like you. I want to see special. If it starts happening every week, then you and I got to get back on here and figure it out then.
I look forward to that, as I look forward to always having you on the show, Joe. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us.
Thanks, Malika.